Well, you know, running a statewide campaign today, 2010, far different than it was even in 2000. When you talk about in terms of that constant communication, their iPhones everywhere. Literally, what you say right now could be tweeted out to the rest of the world 2 seconds from now. Is that sort of strange for a politician, knowing that really you have to be so extra careful about every little thing you say, wondering how it might get perceived or how it might get bounced around? I mean, how do you handle that now in this particular environment that we're in?
Well, I think that would be strange for anybody if your viewers just think about living life
really? It's
under
like in the fishbowl.
Yeah, it is a little bit odd. It is a little bit strange. The good thing for me and the way I cope with it is I'm very strongly oriented toward my family. I go home every night so I can be with my children and with my wife of 15 years, Amy, who I met at Clemson University while we were there. It really keeps me grounded. I've lived in Camden my entire life, lived in Columbia for a few years while I was in school and worked over here for the federal court. But it really keeps me grounded. It gives me something to rely on. It gives me something to go home to every night. I get in my truck, I drive around town, and I see my neighbors and friends, and that keeps you sane. That keeps you going.
Was she the first person you told when it was time to make this big decision? How do you even arrive at the decision to say, well, you know what, I am going to run for governor of South Carolina?
Well, first of all, if you have a healthy marriage, you don't tell your wife you're going to run for governor.
This is true.
You talk to her about it, and we did. We talked about it for a long time, a year and a half or so ago, I believe, and she believed it was the right thing to do, and I believed it was the right thing to do. If you care about your state, if you care about your community, and you see things going wrong, and certainly South Carolina's been headed down the wrong path over these last 8 years, then you have to step up and be willing to do something. And so this is our effort to do that, and I think it's turned out to be a much more wonderful opportunity than we would have ever expected, because we've received support in this state that we would have never anticipated.
Is it a little bit unusual, though? Here it is summer. You know, you were in Myrtle Beach this week. You know, last year you could have showed up at pretty much any store in Myrtle Beach and wouldn't have got a second look, you know, outside of the people that really knew who you were.
Sure.
Now, pretty much wherever you go, I know how that is in public. You see the heads turn, you see people start whispering. Has that been unusual for you to get used to at all?
It has been. It has been. Again, I live in a small town, so in a small town, everybody knows what you're doing anyway, and everybody knows each other. I look at South Carolina as a small community, and to me, it's nice to talk to people. It's nice to listen to their concerns. I've traveled the state extensively over the last year and a half, and the most encouraging part and the most rewarding part has been learning from other people what they see as the problems facing our state and what they see as the assets that our state has. It really gives me hope when I get outside of Columbia and see the successful things that are happening in local communities and regions around the state.
Yeah, because if you do stick around Columbia, you tend to hear the same thing over and over and over and over. What's the most interesting thing you hear from people out there in the campaign trail? I mean, I tend to think a lot of people are angry, a lot of people are a little bit downcast about our opportunities, but every now and then you see people who are very hopeful. Do you hear hope out there at all?
Oh, I certainly do, and I hear frustration, of course. I'm frustrated with Columbia and state government because it's broken. It's not working. Clearly, it's been broken for most of the last decade, and that's why our unemployment rate has skyrocketed. It's why college tuition has doubled and tripled. It's why we're seeing young professionals leave the state in incredible numbers. But when you get outside of state government and you talk to people on the local level, you hear great success stories, and that's where the hope comes from. Great success stories in private businesses like the ones I've visited over the last year and the two that I was at yesterday, and great success stories in local governments. Look at Charleston and what's happened down there over the last 2 decades to make it a city that is renowned around the world. Yeah. Look at some of the hospital systems in this state who are utilizing cutting-edge technology and have become known in their specialties, or our technical college system. Some of the campuses are doing things that are modeled around South Carolina, around the nation and even in other parts of the world. So once you get outside of the broken state government that we have, the dysfunctional attitudes, there really is cause for hope.
Taking you back to college days, Clemson University, your opponent, also a Clemson grad. If the two of you ever had occasion to talk about your college days, you would have been there right around the same time, I imagine.
You know, apparently, I'm a little bit older than my opponent, but apparently we were there at least for 2 years together, but didn't know each other. It is interesting because I don't believe there has been a Clemson graduate as governor since Strom Thurmond.
Is that right?
I believe that's correct.
And no matter what happens in this outcome, our governor will be under the age of 40, and I don't believe that has ever happened either.
There's been a couple. Fritz Hollings, I believe, was 35 or 36 when he was elected, and he was one of the best governors that we ever had. He really had that energy and the commitment to be creative, and he helped to found the technical college system, as you know, and he also really started that model of having a governor very involved in economic development, something we've been missing over this administration. And something that's affected us profoundly in not a good way was having a governor who was personally involved in economic development. So I actually look back at people like Governor Fritz Hollings as a model that you can build upon.
Is that somebody that you would emulate? I've had conversations with him, and boy, he told me even a couple of years ago, he said, I don't know if I'd be in politics today. It's too nasty.
Well, I bet he would. He has got a fighting spirit, but he was willing to work with people. He was willing to work with different regions of the state, bring people together, and he really created that model of involving the private sector in state government and state government economic development, which worked so well to bring projects over the years like Michelin and BMW. Carroll Campbell really utilized that same approach back in the 80s and in the 90s. And there's lessons to be learned from people like Fritz Hollings and Carroll Campbell that if they'd have been applied over the last 10 years, we'd be in much better position today.
Well, Senator, that's all the time we have for right now, but invite us out on the campaign trail sometime this summer.
Love to have you. It's a lot of fun.
Appreciate you being here in the big picture.
Thank you. Thank you.